I don't think anyone would deny it when I say Smash Bros. Has come a long way since its beginnings. A clear indication is how the whole concept of the game basically evolved from being a Nintendo All-Star Fighter to a video game All-Star Fighter. From a glorified proof of concept all the way to a game known for the phrase "everyone is here," the Smash Bros. Roster has become insane at this point, featuring characters that once seemed like they'd be nothing more than dreams. A big part of that comes from the mind-blowing guest characters featured from non-Nintendo games. And then you look at the guest characters featured as assist trophies, Mii costumes, and spirits, and it all sounds like something that would be impossible to come true. Except it is. I want to focus on the actual playable guest characters though, to look back at the impact they had and left on the Smash Bros. Series. And here, I will answer the question of, out of all 18 guest characters, who is the best of them all? Starting off, I should elaborate on what I mean when I use the very vague word of best. I want to determine who was the most impactful guest to the series. Someone you can look at and say, this series would not be the same without that character. To do that, I'll be looking at how they're viewed in the fandom, the reception during and after their reveals, and also how important they are to gaming as a whole. We're going to be going through each guest character in chronological order of when they were revealed to the public. So because Smash 64 and Melee didn't feature any guest characters, but did manage to sneak in stuff from GoldenEye 007 and Perfect Dark, we'll be going right to Brawl, which had 2 guest characters. The first of them was Solid Snake from the Metal Gear series. Revealed in E3 2006 during the first trailer for Brawl, Snake was definitely an unexpected surprise. This was partially due to his part of the trailer being saved for the very end where it seemed like it was all over, but then comes an incoming codec, so get back in your seats because there's one last surprise. The shock of Snake's inclusion also came from considering what game franchise he came from. Nintendo's well known for its family-friendly games, so to announce that the face of an M-rated franchise with plenty of death, sexual themes, and critiques on politics would show up alongside Nintendo's All-Stars certainly threw some fans for a loop. Snake was initially considered because of a request from the creator of the Metal Gear series himself, Hideo Kojima. Because his son was a fan of Smash 64 and asked if it could feature one of his dad's characters, Kojima reached out to Sakurai during Melee's development, wondering if Snake could possibly be added to the roster. Sakurai had to deny the request, probably saying something like this. Bro, I've been working on this game non-stop. I've had no holidays. I ended up hospitalized because of this. I've only got a 13-month development cycle. I literally cannot slip anything else in unless you want it to be janky as hell. And that's why we have wave dashing and Ganondorf as a Captain Falcon wannabe. When the time came for a new Smash Bros. Game to be made for the Wii, Kojima ran his request by once again, and at the perfect time for Snake to actually make the cut. And boy was he done well. From the design being a composite of Solid Snake designs with some elements of Naked Snake from MGS3 thrown in as well, to the way he's portrayed in the Subspace Emissary, to his unique moveset with a focus on explosives and heavy physical attacks, to having an Easter egg that results in hidden codec conversations about each playable character, they clearly poured a lot of love into this character. And they kind of had to show they're capable of respectfully representing other companies' characters and to pay tribute to one of the most influential video game franchises of all time. I feel like the average Smash fan doesn't realize how important the Metal Gear franchise is to gaming. You know how people love it when games have good stories and engaging ways of telling those stories, usually through things like cutscenes, voice acting, and the gameplay throughout? The first game to really take that seriously and prove it's something that can be done well in video games was the first Metal Gear Solid. Other games attempted this, but often failed in one aspect or another. Metal Gear Solid doubled down on having movie-like elements and characters, as well as engaging stealth-based gameplay that wasn't afraid to get even crazier. MGS had a story and message like nothing else at the time, making it feel like something well worth experiencing. The Metal Gear series had already been a thing before that, but this game and the following sequels in the MGS series were on another level. So with all of that in mind, plus the joy he brought with his appearance in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, I think it's pretty clear why fans were upset after learning that he wouldn't be returning in Smash 3DS and Wii U. Snake was the only guest character in all of Smash Bros. To have been cut between games. The true reason as to why he and everything else Metal Gear was removed is unknown to the public. Perhaps Snake was only ever planned to be a one-time guest, or maybe that was influenced by decisions from Nintendo or Konami. One theory that may or may not line up based on time frames is that this was somehow connected to Kojima's falling out with Konami. But Snake would make a spectacular comeback in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. He retained a lot of what he brought back in Brawl, but that was more than enough to satisfy his previously disappointed fans. There wasn't much added in regards to moveset changes or adding in new codecs for the remaining characters in Smash Ultimate, but he did come with a brand new series icon for Metal Gear. Back in Brawl, it was the Foxhound logo, which Kojima also uses as his personal logo. Now it's the famous Metal Gear exclamation point. This is the first time a series icon got a complete replacement, and considering the previous icon's association with Kojima, that kind of implies the Kojima versus Konami situation was the reason for Snake's absence in Smash 3DS and Wii U. Initially, Snake was going to be the only guest character in Brawl, until the game got delayed to fit in a newly greenlit character. Sega's Sonic the Hedgehog. Obviously, with a character as famous for being a rival to Nintendo's mascot himself, fans were going to wonder what this game would be like if they could have these two mascots fight in Super Smash Bros. He received a few votes on polls made by Sakurai on potential characters for a hypothetical second Smash game. He was requested for Melee by Sonic's creator before being turned down due to time constraints, much like Solid Snake. And then there was that famous Electronic Gaming Monthly April Fool's prank of Sonic and Tails in Melee. Get 20 kills in Cruel Melee to find out just how gullible you are. As time went on, more and more people would end up wanting Sonic in Smash, and that dream would finally be cast in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Again, he was a late inclusion though. A few sacrifices had to be made, including being stuck into the very end of the Subspace Emissary like an afterthought, because he was one, and having a rather uninspired moveset. A lot of his moves are just him rolling around in his ball form in pretty basic ways, with a lot of his other moves being recycled from other characters. Some fans express their disappointment towards this moveset, but others are satisfied just having Sonic in the first place. He's the first ever guest to be treated like something even more special because he returned for Smash 3DS and Wii U while Snake didn't. Sonic has stuck as part of the roster ever since his debut, making him a series staple at this point. Speaking of Smash 3DS and Wii U, now's a good time to segue into the 5 new guest characters introduced in those games' shared roster. This was the start of every new character getting their own reveal trailers, increasing the hype they'd receive upon their official announcement. And what better way to kick that off than with Animal Crossing's Villager. Wait, he's first party. I mean with Capcom's Mega Man. In a similar vein to Snake's announcement in Brawl's first trailer, Mega Man was saved for the end of the first Smash 3DS and Wii U trailer. Unlike Snake though, who'd get an individual trailer later on, this was Mega Man's full reveal trailer played right after the technical first trailer. The trailer was easily one of the most exciting ones out of all of the Smash 3DS and Wii U trailers. There were a ton of references, callbacks, And the way they showcased his moveset being composed of various robot master abilities was brilliant. Mega Man had been in a similar situation as Sonic in the Smash Bros. Fandom before his inclusion. Mega Man received the same amount of votes as Sonic in the Smash 2 polls, showing there was some outcry for this character. In Brawl's time, however, demand for him increased, with a lot of fans thinking if there were to be a third guest character in Brawl, it would and should be Mega Man. This didn't happen, but the fan demand kept growing. I remember the days when people would post videos of their top 10 characters for the next Smash game after Brawl, with a lot of them including Mega Man, usually very high on their lists, often getting the #1 spot. And it's pretty easy to see why so many people would gravitate towards the idea of Mega Man in Smash. The Mega Man series was one of Capcom's most heavily beloved franchises and spawned so many sequels and spin-offs you'd think it would never die. Unfortunately, the Mega Man series, particularly the classic series, started to fade away in the 2000s, with a lot less titles made and some pretty poor decisions being made on Capcom's part. It seemed like Mega Man was dying, but fans stayed hopeful that his luck could change and he'd make it into the Smash Bros. Family. I think a big part of that also has to do with how tied classic Mega Man is to Nintendo. So many Mega Man games were made for the NES, making some view him more as a Nintendo classic. Thankfully, Sakurai recognized this and was able to work with Capcom to get the Blue Bomber into the game. More impressively, Sakurai made a moveset that utilized many of his abilities throughout his history, while also making his general gameplay and movements feel like it was almost one-to-one with how they are in the classic Mega Man games. It was an unbelievable way of paying tribute to a character with a rich history and die-hard fans. But keep in mind how hard the Mega Man series is. This should help explain why some Smash fans don't enjoy playing as Mega Man. The way he moves and fights is like a retro platformer character, not like a traditional Smash character. This makes it difficult for some unfamiliar with Mega Man to get used to how he plays, with some going as far as saying he needs a full moveset rework. But for those more familiar with Mega Man, or those who can adapt to such a different playstyle, he ends up being a really fun character that brings a smile to those players' faces. The following year after Mega Man's reveal, E3 2014, there would be a bonus Smash Bros. Presentation where we'd get the last new guest character in the main game's roster. And with Namco Bandai working with Nintendo to develop this iteration of Smash Bros., it was no surprise, but exciting nonetheless to get the one and only Pac-Man. The face of an arcade game that I'm sure everyone watching this video has played in some capacity in their lives. And while Pac-Man's notability mostly comes from and stays with the arcade games, he's still a character that pops up every now and then because of how iconic he's been ever since 1980. So while some may think that this is just Namco's way of slipping one of their own characters into Smash, it's actually more so done out of representing a key part of video game history. Interestingly enough, Shigeru Miyamoto himself requested Pac-Man for Brawl, but Sakurai at the time could only see Pac-Man as the classic pizza with a missing slice. Given more time and a new entry, Sakurai then reconsidered and looked to the Pac-Land design for Pac-Man. He was also recommended the recent Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures design by Namco, but he was so dead set on using the Pac-Land design that he actually considered not even including Pac-Man if he was forced to use the Ghostly Adventures design. And with that design, he could better visualize Pac-Man as a combatant who would have some other holes in his moveset filled with references to various Namco arcade games. It actually became one of the quirkiest moveset that's actually rather difficult to get used to. Some people are able to utilize all of his wacky tools to the fullest, but others end up having too much of a hard time and unfortunately end up avoiding this character. But even then, this was a good way to focus on beloved classics for guest characters in Smash 3DS and Wii U. But that's not where it ends because of DLC. DLC chose some visually different characters from the more cartoony retro mascots, but the picks were still big faces to gaming history. And they started with a fantastic guest in the form of a second Capcom character, Street Fighter's Ryu. Not only did this give us a series first with a second character from an already represented third-party company, but it also gave us another admittedly no-brainer guest. Smash Bros, having its root as a fighting game, obviously has a lot to thank Street Fighter for. The fighting game that's pinpointed as the catalyst for the rise of fighting games is Street Fighter 2, a fighting game that took arcades by storm because of the way it plays. Previous fighting games were pretty bland because of the lack of engaging gameplay. That ended up being fixed with a glitch in Street Fighter 2 that became the reason it had combos in the first place, aka one of the most important and impactful glitches of all time. Wave dashing's got nothing on this. Combos helped bring a more exciting edge to fighting games, giving new techniques to learn, which, in turn, would bring more pride from involvement and excitement to each match. From there on, if new fighting games didn't have combos, they weren't worth your time or quarters. Thus, practically every fighting game after it either directly or indirectly thanks Street Fighter 2. This also includes Super Smash Bros. Because the big fighting game craze after Street Fighter 2 had fighting games in Sakurai's mind. Fighting games for some were seen as too difficult to pick up and play for new players, which was the main idea behind Super Smash Bros. Sakurai asked himself the question, how can I make a beginner-friendly fighting game that also appeals to hardcore players? So yeah, throwing in the face of fighting games was a great way of paying tribute to the origins of the rise of Smash's genre. Potentially, if there was no Street Fighter 2, there might have been no Super Smash Bros. Speaking of tribute, Ryu was a character they went the extra mile with when crafting his moveset. The attacks themselves are pretty obvious considering he already has his own fighting game moveset, but the way he plays in Smash Bros. Was specifically designed to mirror elements of Street Fighter. Street Fighter games are 6-button focused, with 3 buttons for light, medium, and heavy punches, and 3 buttons for light, medium, and heavy kicks. Smash is mostly a 2-button game, so Sakurai came up with the creative solution of making you tap the button on standard attacks for light attacks, and hold the button for medium attacks. Ryu also has heavy attacks for his smash attacks, the ability to cancel most moves into special moves, and the option to do the classic Street Fighter special move commands to use stronger versions of his specials. It makes for a moveset that will leave newer players a bit confused, but take the time to practice and get tricks down to muscle memory, and you have yourself a super fun character. Also, bonus points for giving him 2 final smashes. Before getting into this next character, I want to know if any of you watching remember this.
Hey guys, would've been awesome in Brawl if they put in Cloud from Final Fantasy VII?
Yeah, that actually happened. Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy is a huge RPG franchise, so there was obviously going to be requests for someone from Final Fantasy to join Smash. What character exactly differed between fans due to Final Fantasy games changing the cast between entries? Obviously, by his inclusion and the Brawl Taunts joke I showed, Cloud from Lucky Number 7 was the most requested. That might seem like an odd choice at first, when those not familiar with the franchise would think Smash would rather go for someone from the first or latest entry. The thing they probably didn't realize was the fact that Final Fantasy VII is kind of seen as the magnum opus of the Final Fantasy franchise. It's one of, if not the most beloved entry in the series, and left a huge impact on gamers and gaming as a whole with its story and characters. So while they could have gone with someone from any Final Fantasy game, there was only going to be one correct answer for which game to pick if they could only pick one. Still, requested or not, this was a reveal that caught everyone off guard. A character people wanted, but never really expected. A character who was pretty much a PlayStation exclusive with, at the time, no appearances on a Nintendo console. This helps show that this was no longer about promoting Nintendo. It was about showing love for gaming as a whole. But it was no easy task to get Cloud in. Square Enix is known for being difficult to work with. They know the impact of their IPs, so if anyone wants to use their characters or anything, they charge a pretty penny. This meant Cloud's DLC pack kind of got the short end of the stick. There were only 2 FF7 songs included in his bundle, and Cloud was only voiced in Japanese in all language settings. These, along with the obviously low-budgeted reveal trailer, showed that they were pretty tight on DLC budget because of his inclusion. Still, they got the monumentous accomplishment of just getting Cloud in general, something that other games like Soul Calibur 2 and PlayStation All-Stars failed to do. And Cloud as a playable character was also a lot of fun. For a character with a big, heavy sword, he's actually a lot speedier with some great combo potential and the ability to upgrade special moves with his limit meter. Although he ended up being a little too good, resulting in some nerfs done to better balance him when he returned for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And of course, I have to mention that the base game added nothing new from the FF7 franchise. No new music, no new spirits, aside from Cloud's, which were just his Smash Ultimate renders, and Cloud was still only voiced in Japanese. Remember, I said the base game of Smash Ultimate. We're not there yet. Now to close off Smash 3DS and Wii U's guest characters with the quote-unquote fighter ballot winner. At the time, we were to believe that the winner of the ballot was Platinum Games' Bayonetta. This reveal was immediately followed up with a lot of questions. Bayonetta had some significant outcry, but in comparison to other highly voted on characters like King K. Rool, Banjo-Kazooie, and Bandana D, Bayonetta wasn't anywhere close. After her trailer, we were told that she was apparently the #1 voted character in Europe and among the top 5 in the US, both of which among realizable fighters. It wouldn't be until 5 years later that it would be confirmed that this was all one big lie, because apparently the real winner of the fighter ballot was Sora. I guess he wasn't realizable at the time. But then you look at patch data in Smash 4 and see that between Ryu and the announcement of Cloud, there was in-game data suggesting that Ike and Zero Suit Samus's data were duplicated, likely to serve as bases for Cloud and Bayonetta respectively. How soon was this? 2 weeks after the announcement of the fighter ballot. Talk about a rigged ballot. Yes, we ended up getting many highly requested fighters from the ballot in Smash Ultimate, but for Smash 3DS and Wii U, this felt like a slap in the face. The controversy with Bayonetta didn't stop there. Bayonetta was the second character to come from an M-rated franchise, with lots of gore, swearing, and sexual themes. Toning all of this down isn't that hard conceptually, but it still makes this a rather jarring choice for a new guest character. The Bayonetta series is also a hack-and-slash series focused on keeping up long combo strings. This meant that they wanted to keep this long combo-focused style when implementing her into Smash Bros. This was incredibly problematic because when other characters can't typically land such long and difficult to escape combos, it puts her in a class of her own above everyone else. Add a counter move where Bayonetta can either negate all knockback or slow opponents down temporarily with better timing, and she easily became the most overpowered character in Smash 3DS and Wii U. Bayonetta had to get nerfed in the final patch of Smash 3DS and Wii U, and upon seeing that she was still pretty broken in an official Smash Ultimate tournament held by Nintendo before the game's launch, she got nerfed even more upon Ultimate's official release. She can still do some of her hack and slash-esque combos, but not as reliably or effectively as she could in Smash 3DS and Wii U. Which makes it all the funnier because now it's rather rare to see players using Bayonetta in Smash Ultimate. That could just be me, but if not, then that's a clear indication that Bayonetta lost what made her fun after all the nerfs. And even then, wasn't seen as fun when fighting against her without the nerfs. The great legacy of the ballot winner, am I right? And now we enter the Smash Ultimate era, where we got every previous guest back, along with that amount being more than doubled with new guests. This game gave us a total of 11 new guest characters, which I can't stress enough how insane that is. Though I kind of consider it to actually be 10 new guests, considering how linked the next two are. Simon and Richter Belmont from the Castlevania series. Konami actually came back swinging in Smash Ultimate. Snake was already good enough, more than good enough, but then we got another Konami franchise that was treated with so much love. Castlevania is another franchise like Mega Man, where it has a pretty strong link with Nintendo thanks to its earlier entries. You could say that for a lot of the Castlevania games, but the original quadrilogy were highly popular and recognizable games for the NES and SNES. They're also some of the most important games in the Castlevania series, with another very important one being Castlevania Symphony of the Night. That game wasn't on Nintendo consoles, but because of its style being very much so like Super Metroid, it's the other half that coined the gaming subgenre Metroidvania. And also like Mega Man, Castlevania was fading out in the gaming world. Konami pushed focus on Castlevania towards the Netflix series and pachinko games, so if one thing was going to give this franchise a little more love, it would have been from having a character in Smash. One question was who that character would be. Many requested Simon Belmont, the protagonist of the first Castlevania. He'd be the most recognizable and take a lot of influence from the classic Castlevania games. The other most requested was Alucard, specifically with a focus on Symphony of the Night for his moveset. Both were considered by Sakurai, but in the end, Simon was made the playable character, while Alucard still got some representation as an assist trophy. But that's not all, because for a total of like 5 months, this game tried to glorify clones a bit by labeling them as Echo Fighters. It was more so a way of making people excited for less diverse newcomers due to the team already having their hands full bringing everyone back from before. To help sell that idea, they actually gave us a second Castlevania rep, Richter Belmont, who would play identically to Simon. They were announced back to back to help make Richter's inclusion feel more like a bonus than filler. Richter was another recurring Belmont, specifically in some of the 90s Castlevania games. He also shared the same playstyle as just about every other Belmont, so making him an Echo Fighter didn't feel out of the ordinary. Instead, it actually makes more sense since some of Simon's moves came from some of Richter's moves in Symphony of the Night. As for the rest of the moves and the overall playstyle, I again compare them to Mega Man because the team was dedicated to make them feel almost exactly the same as in the Castlevania games. Their whole focus is distance because mobility and aerial mobility serves as a weakness. Most of their moves focus on their vampire killer whips, which then allow you to follow up and keep greater distance with sub-weapons used as special moves. This makes for an interesting playstyle that can be a lot of fun when mastered, but it's also heavily criticized as one of the least fun playstyles to fight against. Some will only ever spam projectiles when using these characters, which makes people want to distance themselves from these characters. It sucks to say because of how much love you can see from these two and their many callbacks. And to close out Smash Ultimate's base roster, we have one more third-party Echo Fighter, but one that feels like an exception to the Echo Fighter status. Another Street Fighter rep in the form of Ken Masters. Including Ken makes a lot of sense, since in terms of fighting games, he is more or less the original Echo Fighter. He and Ryu were the only playable characters in the original Street Fighter, but they were more so different skins of each other than completely different characters. They shared the same moveset and carried that over to Street Fighter II as well. As the Street Fighter series progressed, Ken would begin to adopt some of his own moves while still retaining a lot from Ryu, making him more like a Smash Bros. Semi-clone. Think like how Luigi became more distinct from Mario with every succeeding Smash game. This same idea was brought over when bringing Ken into Smash Bros. He was stuck with the Echo Fighter label, but had more distinct features that could make him worthy of losing that label. I mean, the fact that Ken is labeled as an Echo Fighter, but Dr. Mario isn't, raises a lot of questions. And Ken's personal nuances give him a very different feel from Ryu. Ryu is more varied, focusing more on landing a combo with light attacks, maybe also some medium attacks, and finishing with heavy attacks. Ken's got a greater focus on keeping damage coming with combos because he has a lot of multi-hit attacks and kicks designed to keep opponents close until you're ready to finish the combo with something a bit heavier. Because of that, Ken doesn't have the same kill potential as Ryu. He instead relies more on keeping his combo game up so the enemy percent keeps coming until you get them to kill percent. I feel like a lot of players still see him as a second Ryu, so those who already found Ryu to be too difficult to learn automatically brush off Ken. But Ken brings a very different style than Ryu, even if some moves and animations are shared. If they were to give Ken a fair chance, maybe they'd see that and see him in a more appealing light. Or maybe they'd still be turned off by his attack variations and command inputs, thus making them still avoid him and Ryu. It's pretty sad, but for those who understand Ken and Ryu, they can have themselves a blast.